All right, welcome back to the deep dive. You know the drill. You bring the fascinating material, and we roll up our sleeves and really dig in. So today we're diving into a book that I found really interesting called Quantum Success. It's by Sandra Taylor.
Oh, interesting choice.
Yeah, and I was particularly drawn to it. It kind of blends these personal anecdotes and practical advice, and it all revolves around this, well, using quantum physics to achieve success. It's a bold idea, I think.
It is, yeah. And I think it's important to point out right from the get-go that Taylor doesn't present this as some mystical far-out concept.
Right.
She really tries to ground these ideas, these quantum ideas, in both scientific principles, real science, and also in kind of relatable everyday experiences.
Right, right. It's not just a bunch of like airy-fairy woo-woo stuff.
Right, exactly.
Okay, well, let's get into it. The foundation of quantum success is this concept that our consciousness shapes our reality. That's a pretty big statement right there.
It is a big one.
I'm curious to see how Taylor, backs that up.
Well, she uses this really kind of vivid analogy of a boiling pot
Yeah.
to explain this concept. So, like,
Uh-huh.
imagine your mind is the pot, and your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, those are the ingredients that you're putting in. Whatever you put in that pot, all those ingredients, they ultimately determine what the final dish is going to be, like the dish of your life.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting metaphor, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I think we've all heard that, positive thinking can be beneficial, right? Like that's kind of a common idea.
Right.
But quantum success takes it, I think, a step further by saying that these thoughts and emotions aren't just internal.
Right.
They're not just happening in your head.
Right.
They're actually emitting energy that influences the external world, the world outside of us.
That's right. And that is a central idea in the book. It's like each of us is broadcasting this unique energy signature, and it precedes us, it goes ahead of us, and it influences our interactions with other people. Taylor even compares it to, back in the day they used to send letters of introduction ahead of you if you're traveling somewhere new to kind of establish your reputation.
Oh, interesting. So it's like first impressions, but on a cosmic level, I guess.
Yes, precisely. And to illustrate this point, Taylor shares this really compelling story about a client of hers who was completely preoccupied with food. I mean, it was to the point that it was actually hindering in other areas of her life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But when she consciously shifted her focus and energy towards her career, she actually found success in both areas. So what's really interesting here is not just like the positive outcome,
Hmm.
but the fact that a simple shift in her focus, in what she was giving her attention to, seemed to create this tangible shift in her reality.
Hmm. I mean, this idea of personal resonance, that's fascinating. And if we're constantly projecting negativity, fear, anger, self-doubt, things like that, then according to Taylor, we're actually attracting more of the same back to ourselves.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like we're setting the stage unknowingly for our experiences based on this energy that we're putting out into the world. Think about a time you felt someone's energy even before you met them.
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe you got a bad vibe from an email or you
Mhm.
instantly felt at ease during a phone call. Have you ever had that happen?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, all the time.
And quantum success dives into why that might be, suggesting that our energy acts as this kind of invisible signal, influencing how other people perceive us and interact with us. Pretty fascinating idea, isn't it?
It is. It's pretty wild. It makes you think about like, okay, what kind of energy am I putting out there, Now, Taylor doesn't just leave us hanging with all these kind of theoretical concepts.
Right.
She actually goes on to outline 7 what she calls universal laws of success. And they're essentially like the rules of the game,
Right.
if you want
Mhm.
to play on this quantum level.
Yeah, and while we might not have time to go into all 7 in depth, during this deep dive, let's at least touch on a few that I think might resonate with our
Right,
listeners.
yeah. Good idea.
One that I find particularly interesting is the law of paradoxical intent. Have you ever noticed
Mhm.
that, like, the more desperately you want something, the further away it seems to slip, like it's just out of reach?
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, like when you're on a job hunt and you're like laser focused on landing this one specific role and like every interview just goes south. The rejections just pile up. It's like, what am I doing wrong?
That's a perfect example of paradoxical intent in action right there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Taylor even shares a personal anecdote about her own struggle to get quantum success published. She talks about how It wasn't until she finally let go of that desperate need for it to happen, like she finally found a sense of peace with the possibility of it not working out.
Yeah.
And then things shifted and the book deal materialized.
That makes so much sense. It's like when you're trying too hard, you're actually like blocking the very thing that you want to come to you.
Yeah, exactly.
But how do we let go of that desperation, especially when something feels so important to us, you know? Quantum success must have some advice on that.
Oh, it does. And actually kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, this idea of releasing, right?
Yeah.
Like letting go.
Right.
Taylor, she emphasizes that letting go of that tight grip that we have on our desires, kind of surrendering to the flow of the universe,
Yeah.
that can actually be more effective than just, striving and forcing and, like white knuckling it.
So it's like finding that like balance between focused intention,
Right.
but also surrender.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, another universal law that I thought was really interesting and that you might connect with as well is the law of harmony.
Ooh, the law of harmony. I feel calmer already
Right.
just hearing those
It
words.
does have a nice peaceful ring to it, doesn't it? It's all about alignment, aligning your energy with yourself, with other people, and also with kind of like the flow of the universe.
It's interesting to think about. Think about like an area of your life where you feel out of sync,
Yeah.
maybe at work or in a relationship or just like personally with yourself. Could applying the principles of harmony, from this book, could that help you find a little more balance and flow in that area?
It's a great question. And quantum success actually gives you some practical advice on how to do this.
Oh,
Taylor, she highlights the importance of self-care, making sure you're taking care of yourself, releasing negative thoughts, and really cultivating positive relationships with people. It's really about creating this kind of sense of inner coherence that then ripples outwards into, our experiences in the outside world.
it reminds me of that saying, your vibe attracts your tribe.
Right.
But this is kind of taking it a step further, I think, by suggesting that our vibe attracts not just people, but opportunities, experiences, even material things.
Yes, absolutely. And to really kind of solidify this idea of how our energy impacts our experiences, Taylor shares this really poignant story about a man named David whose personal resonance was really holding him back professionally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was plagued by fear, worried about being judged and rejected, and this was preventing him from really, putting himself out there, sharing his ideas, moving forward in his career.
So did you try to like fake it till you make it?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
Quantum success really emphasizes the importance of genuine inner transformation,
Oh, okay.
not just superficial changes. So David had to do some deep inner work to really shift his energy, and he started practicing affirmations, releasing those negative thought patterns, visualizing himself succeeding. He didn't try to deny or suppress his fear, but he acknowledged it and then actively worked to shift his internal state.
So it wasn't about pretending everything was fine. It was about actually shifting his energy to align with what he wanted to experience.
Exactly. He intentionally cultivated a more confident and positive resonance. And what's amazing is the book highlights that this wasn't just some wishful thinking exercise. It actually produced real, tangible results. David went from being stuck in a dead-end job to, achieving a series of promotions. He actually became a vice president.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. It
Yeah.
really makes you wonder, like, okay, what kind of energy are we projecting right now? And how might that be shaping our reality, even in ways that we're not even consciously aware of?
Yeah, it's a question worth thinking about. And that brings us to another key aspect of quantum success, which is the practical techniques for actually aligning with these universal laws. Because it's one thing to, understand these concepts intellectually, but how do we actually apply them in our daily lives?
Right. We need some tools, right? Not just knowledge. So what does quantum success suggest?
Well, Taylor offers a variety of methods for shifting our energy and aligning with these universal laws. She talks about visualization techniques, affirmations, releasing exercises. It's a pretty comprehensive toolkit.
It is, yeah. Let's talk about visualizations, for example. I'm a big believer in the power of visualization, but I'm always curious to hear, new approaches. What does Taylor have to say about that?
Well, she shares this great story about a man named Tom who had, like, a crippling fear of public speaking.
Oh, I feel you there.
Yeah. Like, he had this big presentation coming up that was super important for his career, but his fear was so intense that he was almost paralyzed by it.
Oh, yeah, like my heart starts racing just thinking about public speaking. So, How did Tom overcome his fear? Did he just picture himself like, as a super charismatic speaker, effortlessly delivering this like flawless presentation?
Not quite. He used a technique called mental desensitization, which is basically gradually exposing yourself
Ugh.
to the fear-inducing scenario, but in your mind, your imagination.
Yeah.
But the key here is he did it in a very controlled way. He started with a very manageable level of quote-unquote exposure and then gradually increased the intensity.
Oh, so it's like you're slowly building up your mental tolerance.
Exactly, exactly. And with each visualization, Tom really focused on attaching positive emotions to the experience. Feelings of confidence, ease, even joy. And by the time the actual presentation rolled around, he had mentally rehearsed it so many times with such positive associations that his fear had significantly diminished.
It's like he rewired his brain to respond differently to the trigger.
Right.
That's so interesting. So it's not about ignoring the fear or trying to suppress it. It's about actively transforming his relationship to it.
Exactly. And that's a key theme throughout quantum success, this idea of transformation. Now, you mentioned releasing earlier, and I know that's a word that comes up a lot in the book. But what does it actually mean to release something?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Taylor addresses this in a very comprehensive way, I have to say. She talks about releasing on multiple levels: physical, mental, emotional, even behavioral.
Okay, unpack that a little bit for me. What does like physical releasing look like?
Well, it can be something as simple as exercise. Remember we talked about how our emotions are actually stored in our bodies?
Right, right.
So when we move our bodies, we help to process and release those pent-up emotions. It's like, that post-workout euphoria you
Oh,
feel.
yeah, I love that feeling.
Well, maybe it's not just endorphins. Maybe it's quantum physics in action.
I like that idea. Okay, so what about mental releasing then?
Mental releasing is really about becoming aware of those negative thought patterns, those mental loops that kind of keep us stuck in fear or worry or self-doubt, and then letting them go. Taylor highlights two major culprits here, two things that really tend to trip us up: judgment and worry.
Oh, tell me about it. I can like literally spend hours agonizing over things that never even happened. It's exhausting.
And it's unproductive, as quantum success points out, because worry doesn't actually solve anything. It just creates more mental and emotional turmoil,
Right.
which then spills over into our energy and ultimately into our experiences.
Ugh, it's like a vicious cycle. So how do we break free from those mental traps?
It's about conscious awareness and intentional redirection, noticing when those negative thoughts arise and consciously choosing to replace them with more positive and empowering thoughts. It takes practice, but quantum success offers some really helpful tools for cultivating this mental discipline.
It sounds like it's about like retraining our minds to focus on what we want rather than what we're afraid of.
Exactly. Now, for emotional releasing, Taylor emphasizes the importance of processing and releasing old hurts or traumas, any lingering negative emotions from the past. This is where things get a bit deeper, I think.
Yeah, it's not just about positive thinking anymore. It's about acknowledging and working through those deeper emotional wounds.
Exactly. It's about clearing out the emotional baggage that we might be carrying, which can really weigh us down energetically and prevent us from moving forward.
So what kind of tools does Taylor suggest for this, for emotional releasing?
She recommends a few different approaches. Journaling can be really helpful. Therapy, of course, is always a good option. Even just talking it out with a trusted friend. The key is to create a safe and supportive space to acknowledge and process those emotions, allowing them to flow through us rather than getting stuck.
It's like creating space for healing, I guess, both internally and externally. Okay, now what about behavioral releasing? Is this where we address bad habits?
You got it. Behavioral releasing is about letting go of unhealthy habits and addictions, anything that drains our energy and prevents us from really living our best lives.
So everything from like endlessly scrolling social media to like overindulging in junk food or that extra glass of wine at night, all that stuff.
Yes, any behavior that doesn't serve our highest good. It's about becoming aware of those patterns
Yeah.
and then consciously choosing to replace them with healthier and more empowering ones.
So releasing in all of its forms, it sounds like it's really about like clearing out the old to make way for the new. It's
Okay.
about creating space mentally, emotionally, physically for those new possibilities to emerge.
Exactly. And speaking of new possibilities, quantum success explores another really intriguing aspect of achieving success:
Yeah.
tapping into unseen support.
Ooh, okay. This is where things get interesting. We're talking about like angels, spirit guides, that sort of thing.
Yeah, Taylor explores the idea that there might be unseen assistants, if
Yeah.
you will, who can help us on our path to success if we're open to receiving their guidance.
Okay, I gotta ask, and maybe this sounds skeptical, but if these unseen helpers are so powerful, why don't they just fix everything for us? Like, why do we have to go through all this work?
It's a good question,
Hmm.
and it's one that a lot of people have, I think. Quantum success suggests that while these unseen forces might offer guidance and support, ultimately, we have free will, and they respect that. They can nudge us in the right direction, maybe open some doors for us, provide inspiration, but we have to be willing to take action and actually do the work ourselves.
So it's like having a cosmic cheering squad, but they're not going to play the game for us.
Exactly. They're there to support and guide us, but
Yeah.
we're the ones who have to step onto the field and, make the plays. And sometimes their help comes in unexpected ways. Taylor shares this fascinating story about a woman who invoked St. Anthony to help her find a lost ring.
Wait, St. Anthony, isn't he the patron saint of lost things?
He is, but here's the twist. The Ibn who invoked him was Jewish, and she found her ring.
No way. So are you saying that these unseen helpers, they aren't limited by religious boundaries?
It would seem not. The point is, there might be resources and support systems available to us that we're not even aware of if we simply open ourselves to the possibility.
It's like we have this whole team of spiritual advisors just waiting for us to call upon them. Okay, so we've talked about the practical techniques, the unseen support. What's the ultimate takeaway from quantum success? What does it mean to live with what Taylor calls a joyous, successful consciousness?
It's about recognizing that success isn't just about external achievements. It's about cultivating an inner state of joy and alignment.
So it's not just about like reaching that destination.
Right.
It's about enjoying the journey along the way and letting that inner state of joy kind of manifest in our external world.
Exactly. And this ties back to this concept of bridging the pleasure gap, which Taylor talks about in the book.
Okay, the pleasure gap. What is that?
It's kind of the gap between our expectations and our actual experience of joy.
Yeah.
Taylor argues that we often withhold happiness. We wait for certain conditions to be met before we allow ourselves to actually feel truly joyful.
Oh, I'm totally guilty of that.
Yeah.
Like I'll be happy when I get that promotion, or I'll be happy when I find my soulmate, or I'll be
Ah.
happy when I finally finish that big project.
We're all kind of conditioned to think that way, aren't we?
Yeah.
But quantum success challenges us to try to find joy in those everyday moments, rather than waiting for these big milestones, way off in the future. It's about shifting our focus from what we lack to what we already have.
Yeah.
Cultivating a sense of appreciation for the present moment.
It's like choosing to be happy now, regardless of the circumstances.
Exactly. And Taylor shares this really amusing anecdote about playing what she calls the happy game with your nephew.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me about the happy game.
So Taylor and her nephew, they would take turns listing things that made them happy. And they started with these really simple things, like snowball fights and hot fudge sundaes. And then they kind of escalated to these completely ridiculous things like snot sandwiches and spider gut soup.
Spider gets soup. Ew.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is, it was a way to find humor and joy in the absurdity of life, and also to kind of train their brains to focus on the positive. But then one day, Taylor's nephew refused to play the happy game.
Oh no. Why?
Well, he was missing his favorite red Power Ranger, and he declared, "Without my Red Ranger, I don't want to be happy."
Oh, poor kid. But I mean, I kind of get it. We've all been there. We've all let like these little things ruin our day.
Right. We get so fixated on what's missing that we forget to appreciate what we have. But quantum success reminds us that, happiness it's really a choice. We don't have to wait for external circumstances to dictate our internal state.
So we have more control over our happiness than we think, than we realize.
Absolutely. And the book suggests that this shift in perspective, it's actually key to achieving success. When we cultivate that inner state of joy and appreciation, we're kind of broadcasting this much more positive energy signature, and that attracts more positive experiences into our lives.
So it's not just about like feeling good. It's about attracting good things into our lives.
You could say that, yeah. And quantum success even explores the idea of living with a playful consciousness.
Playful. Okay, what does that mean? Are we talking like adult bouncy houses here?
Not necessarily, although that does sound fun. It's
Yeah.
it's more about approaching life with a sense of lightness and curiosity. you know, rather than getting bogged down by seriousness and stress.
So finding the fun in the everyday, even when things, feel challenging.
Precisely. Taylor gives this example of how she used to, like, dread doing laundry. Like it was just this chore. But then she started imagining herself as a detective,
A detective.
yeah, like interrogating each garment, asking things like, what did you do to make your mate want to leave you? I saw you wrapped around that underwear.
That's hilarious. And also kind of brilliant.
Right.
It's a great way to just reframe a mundane task.
Exactly. When we inject a little humor and playfulness into our lives, it shifts our energy and makes
Mhm.
us more receptive to joy and inspiration.
It's like giving ourselves permission to lighten up a little bit
Yeah.
and not take everything so seriously.
Exactly. And when we approach life with that kind of playful attitude, we're much more likely to attract positive experiences and achieve success, both personally and professionally.
So to recap, we've got cultivate a joyous consciousness, bridge the pleasure gap, embrace the power of play. Any other key takeaways from quantum success before we wrap things up?
Yeah, one final thought that really resonated with me is this idea that our thoughts truly have the power to shape our reality. It's a concept that runs throughout the book, and it's something that really invites us to, really examine our own thought patterns.
Because if we're constantly thinking negative thoughts, we're essentially creating a negative reality for ourselves.
It's a powerful concept, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But it also suggests that we have this incredible opportunity to create a really positive and fulfilling reality if we choose to focus our thoughts in that direction.
So if our thoughts shape our reality, the question is, what kind of world are we creating with our thoughts right now?
That's the question that quantum success leaves us with. It's both empowering and a little bit daunting, but it also highlights this immense power that we have as conscious creators
Hmm.
to shape not only our own lives, but also the world around us.
It's definitely a lot to think about. I really appreciate you diving into quantum success with me today. This has been really interesting.
It's been my pleasure, really. It's
Yeah.
always fun to explore these kinds of ideas.
And thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into, well, who knows what fascinating topic. But until then, keep those minds curious and those thoughts positive.